Today I want to talk to you about something a little more personal, what it feels like to start over. This isn't the polished version, it's not exciting. I want to show you the real version, right? The version where life feels unfamiliar. You don't really feel like yourself and you're trying to adjust while everything around you seems to be moving faster than you are. So you're starting college, you're starting a new career, a new job, you're ending in a relationship, or you're starting a new relationship. You're reaching a point where your old life doesn't really fit into your new one anymore. Hey guys, welcome back to Dina's Journal. This is a podcast where we talk about anything and everything. Today I want to talk to you about something a little more personal, what it feels like to start over. And looking back, especially this past few weeks and writing this podcast, I looked back to how I started and looking back at some of my biggest moments and the biggest moments where I felt that growth was happening, or maybe I didn't feel at the time, but I see it now. It's not something that necessarily feels like comfort, but I look back at it now and I say, yes, that's the time that I started over, or that's the time that like this big change was happening. And that's what made me who I am today. It was unfamiliar, but I went through it. And one of those first times that I really felt deeply out of place was when I was 17. And the reason I did feel out of place in good and challenging ways, I would say, is first of all, I was really young. I was 17, and it was the first time I left my town. And I'm not saying like for like a quick field trip, like a week or two, but like for 10 months. I came to the US as an exchange student first, and I came from this very small beach town in Europe. Imagine it, like you're on the beach, the weather is great, the temperatures are great, and I get randomly placed in Sitka, Alaska in the US, and with a host family. And even though I knew some English from school, it really challenged me. Like everything was moving so much faster. The culture was different. Language was different. People were moving, their mouths were moving so fast. Like I couldn't understand everything, and I was trying to pretend, and kind of fit into places that that didn't really feel like home and felt very uncomfortable at some times, but at the same time it was one of the best experiences of my life. And like I said, I didn't know it then, but that I got so much growth. I got so many good and amazing experiences that honestly, I don't even know if I will ever get those kind of experiences that I got then. And what I understood from that a little bit then, but more I would say now, is when you're starting over, when you're starting something new, even though it's unfamiliar and it's really hard because it changes your relationship with yourself. Right? You no longer feel certain or as fluent or as grounded as maybe you were. And the life you knew, it's like slowly shifting, and it's becoming something that, yes, it can, now I can look back at it and it's very exciting to kind of tell this story. But really at the time, it was like such a mix of emotions, and now I see and I look back and I think it was one of the best times of my life. And I think that's why unfamiliar seasons feel so destabilizing, right? They can take away your routines, your confidence, the identity that you normally rely on, and even simple things can feel heavier, and you start questioning yourself, and you compare yourself, and you wonder whether you're doing the wrong thing. But a lot of the time, discomfort is not proof that you're doing something wrong. It is proof that something's new, something is changing. And that's a very important difference to kind of highlight, right? But I think with that also comes grief. And it's grief of leaving your own self behind, right? And people don't talk about that as much as maybe you would want them to. Because even when the new chapter feels good, right? It feels exciting, even though it's challenging. there still can be grief about who you were before and how unfamiliar you become with yourself and the people you left behind, right? Because I felt that too, after those 10 months, I ended up going back home. And I spent a year home with my family, and all of a sudden I felt out of place again, even that short period of time, the 10 months. And it felt like I was starting over again to understand my own culture. Even I started forgetting some words, and it felt ridiculous, like after just 10 short months. But that's what happens, right? And I felt that I needed to reconnect all over again with my roots, with my culture, with the language. And that period of my life, and I was there for just over a year, that period of my life taught me that once life stretches you, you don't fully go back to the version of yourself that you were before, right? Once you got away from that routine, from that comfort, let's say, and then you come back to it, it's not the same, and you have to adapt, and you have to realize what to keep and what to leave behind. And that's where I said the grief part comes in, because when you go through these changes, through these seasons, through these challenges, right, when you're starting over, you're learning how to leave those things behind, or you're some of yourself behind, and adapting and adjusting to something new. But still, that's the question, is like, how do you move through a season like that, through a change, without truly losing yourself, without truly losing who you were, even before all these changes, right? And the first thing is to stop having expectations that the beginning will feel smooth and exciting, right? When you set those expectations, I think it sets you up for disappointment, right? Because most beginnings are awkward. They're messy, they're humbling. You usually don't know what you're doing yet. And that's completely normal, I would say. And a lot of people feel like they're failing. But really what it is that you're just starting. You're in the early stages of starting something new, right? And when you think about that, when you don't have that expectation, when you let it play out the way it's supposed to play out, even if it's awkward, even if it's messy, and you let go of the expectation that it's going to be smooth, then you create this environment for yourself that you can only succeed, and you can only go up from there, right? And the second thing is you need to focus less on confidence and more on capacity. Hear me out here. I'm not saying don't be confident, okay? But I think confidence comes with time, comes with experience. It comes later. But what comes first is learning how to keep going, right? Learning how to adjust, learning how to carry more than you used to, right? Because if you're moving to a new place, or starting a new job, a new career, if you're completely changing your life over, you have to learn how to take on more and more and more. And that's, I think, more important than having that initial confidence. When I got to college here, so after my year off, which I highly recommend for anybody starting this kind of journey, like picking colleges, I think taking that year off is amazing, because you get to have that freedom to decide and to understand what you really want to do at school. So when I first came to school here in Boston I ended up getting into geology, which was such an amazing program. And what I learned going through school, and while supporting myself and trying to set goals for my future, which was grad school, moving through that period did not feel amazing every day. There was sacrifices, there was challenges, there was things that I had to let go and focus on more important things. There was friendships that I had to sometimes put aside and focus a lot on getting things done. And good and bad things. But what I realize now, even though everything wasn't set up, nothing was smooth, right? Especially in the beginning. I was moving through it, and I was building capacity. I was learning how to handle things better and better by trying to increase that capacity, you know, and with time came confidence. With time came confidence, and I was able to do things that I never thought I would be able to do. And that season of my life and those challenges taught me discipline. They taught me sacrifice and how to stay committed long term. And I think that matters a lot, especially when you're starting over, because a lot of life is built before you feel ready. I truly believe that like you don't have to be 100% ready to jump into something. I think you build it as you go. At least that's what I did. And the third thing is to let that challenge or whatever you're starting over, that season of your life, to let it teach you what it's trying to teach you. Okay. Some periods can teach patience, some teach resilience, some teach you not to settle, some teach you that what worked in your old life might not work in the new life, right? And for me, different seasons, different times in my life taught me different things. College taught me discipline and sacrifice. Grad school, which by the way, for me, and this is my master's, it was during COVID, and it was, you know, one of the most challenging times because we were so isolated. We were so, you know, I was in a new school, in a new environment. I didn't know anybody. And that can really affect your life, especially as a student. And then later on work, once I got into, right after grad school, once I got into a job, that taught me not to settle. And, you know, I say that because yes, I got a job right out of school. But what I realized then is like, oh, this isn't for me, you know, which is such a great feeling to realize. And also like, I'm not sticking to it only because I have to. I mean, it gave me experience. It gave me the things that I needed to move forward, but definitely taught me not to settle and taught me that there's other ways, there's other things that I can do to find my dream job or my dream career. And then when I decided to go back to academia to do my PhD, that reminded me that even when you've done things before that were challenging and were harder, a new chapter can still make you feel like a beginner again, right? Every time you start something new, you feel like a beginner, and you feel like maybe you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're stepping into, but that's the beauty of it. I think that's the humbling truth of life, right? Growth does not remove uncertainty forever. It just gives you more proof that you can survive it and you can go through it. And I think it's also important to mention here that every time you go through a tough season or a tough part of your life, it's not going to last forever. We need to know that. We need to remind ourselves that. And I think sometimes you're meant to push through. You're meant to go through it. Let it teach you what it's meant to teach you and let it do its thing. I think that's the part where sometimes we struggle. We feel like we failed. We feel like we need to start over. No, sometimes you have to stick with it. Sometimes you have to just see what it's teaching you and what it's trying to tell you. And sometimes you're meant to pivot. Sometimes you're meant to not settle and move on from a situation or a challenge that you're in. I knew that when I finished grad school the first time, I knew that I had to get out of that environment. I wanted to try something new. I wanted to work outside of academia and see what was out there for me. And moving into the corporate world, that did give me stability. And, you know, I got my first apartment and I was able to work more on myself and have a better quality of life. So even like moving jobs and moving careers in a way, it doesn't mean that I failed in a certain position, but like it just meant that I was honest with myself and I knew what I wanted, so I didn't settle, right? And I think that matters too. There's timing for everything, and when you hit that time, when you know that the time is right and you're ready to move on, That's it. I think that's the secret there. If you built your whole life trying to thrive and you become restless about your next goal, like, oh, I need to do the next thing and reach my next goal and finish this challenge or whatever, that can become exhausting, and without realizing it, you're in this like constant cycle that you are trying to move forward quicker and faster and better. Part of growing is not just knowing when to push harder, but it's also knowing when to pause and take a breath and take a moment to understand where you are and when and where you want to be, when to reach higher, and when to appreciate what you've already built. Some new beginnings are worth saying yes to, and that's how I felt when I decided to jump into this PhD. But even after living in the US for years, that experience, even like, learning English throughout this whole year, all these years, and being so immersed into the culture right now that sometimes I'm having a hard time getting back into my own culture, right? It's still coming back to this new challenge or this new season of my life. It still feels like I'm starting over everything. But there's one thing that I know now that I didn't know back when I was 17. And that is that being a beginner is not a weakness, right? It's part of growth. Maybe I didn't know that very well when I was 17 and everything seemed so new and exciting, but at the same time overwhelming. And I didn't feel like I fit in most of the time. And I was trying to fit in so hard and make friends and understand like how to go through life. And I thought that part of my life, I was trying to do everything right. At the same time, jumping into this new career, jumping back to academia, also opened this other side of me, which is the more creative side. And in many ways, it kind of helped me bring this channel back to life. Prior to starting my PhD, I had some time off between my job and the school starting. And, I had that time to sit down and think like, I want to create something and I want to share it. And, that's how that channel kind of started. Even though I had been thinking about it for a long time, but either I didn't have the time or maybe I wasn't putting the time for it. But that moment where I had that little bit of free time, I realized, okay, this is it. This is the time. Even though I was so stressed out for starting this new chapter, I was so stressed out for, going back to school after being out of school for 4 years. I told myself, okay, this is the time. I knew when to pause, step back, look at what I had already built, and look at, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to integrate it, and what I want to create and what I want to show and share. And this reminded me that those unfamiliar seasons, those new beginnings, they don't only test you. Sometimes they reveal parts of you that were waiting to come out, that maybe you didn't even know they were there, or you knew they were there, but you didn't give it space because you were chasing the next thing, because you're always running to get things done. Sometimes when you give yourself that pause, give yourself that moment to reflect, you're finding things about yourself that maybe you didn't know, or maybe you knew, and it was time for it to come out. So if this season of your life feels unfamiliar to you, maybe you're starting a new job, maybe you're coming to the US, or maybe you're traveling to a new country, or you're starting school, whatever it be, you may feel off balance and you're trying to find your footing. I just want to say this. It's okay to feel messy. Don't have expectations. It's okay to not fully feel like your old self yet. It's okay if you don't have everything figured out. That doesn't mean you're behind. That just means you're in the middle. of becoming who you really want to become. And I think what I've learned over time is that starting over it doesn't always happen in a big dramatic move. Usually it happens quietly, right? It happens when life no longer feels familiar to you and you have no choice but to learn as you go, right? You don't have to be 100% ready. You can just learn as you go. And as uncomfortable as that can be, as that challenge can be, or as that new beginning can be, they actually are the ones that shape you the most. From 17 to now 28, it's been 11 years, right? And I've seen myself grow so much, and I've seen things shape me, environments, places, people, relationships, school, work. All these things have shaped me to become who I am today. And I like who I am today. And I want you to feel the same way. I want you to feel that whatever you're going through right now, whatever change, if you're starting over, it's okay because you're right in the middle of it. And I'm in the middle of it, of something else, right? And I'm going to, maybe 10 years from now, I'll come back and look at this again and say what happened in those last 10 years. So if you are in that season right now, I hope this reminds you that just because something feels uncomfortable or uncertain, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. And sometimes it simply means that you are growing into a life that asks more of you. And with that, thank you again for joining me today in another episode of Dina's Journal. And thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your patience. I'm still trying to figure out the format of this podcast and how often I want to come up with an episode. A lot of things get in the way. I want to be here every week with you guys to do another episode, but sometimes it doesn't always happen. But thank you so much for putting it in the comments and asking me what the next episode will be. And thank you for listening and sharing and liking and subscribing. You guys are the best. And I love the community that I'm building here. And I love that I'm having these conversations with you and in the comments as well. Always love the comments. And again, if you would like to follow me on all other social platforms, you can do it at Dinas_journal. I share my life, and I share cooking, and I share everything that fits this type of content. And again, until next time, thank you. Bye.